The radar screen flickered in the pre-dawn darkness of Nelly's Air Force Base, Nevada, a constellation of green dots drifting across black glass like fireflies trapped in amber. Senior Airman Marcus Vaughn leaned closer, his coffee forgotten, steam curling into nothing. One of the dots wasn't moving right. It pulsed erratically, altitude jumping in 1,000-foot increments, transponder code garbled into digital nonsense. The duty officer, Captain Teresa Moss, stood behind him with her arms crossed, jaw tight. "How long?" she asked. Vaughn checked the timestamp. "6 minutes since first anomaly, ma'am. It's a C-130J tail number Hotel Tango 47. Flight plan filed for White Sands, but she's drifting west, descending without clearance." Moss reached for the radio, her fingers steady despite the cold dread pooling in her gut. Military aviation accidents were rare, but when they happened fast. "Hotel Tango 47, Nelly's Tower, radio check. Static. Vaughn's screen updated. Altitude now reading 8,000 feet, dropping. The aircraft was over the desert, 30 miles southeast, no other traffic nearby." Moss tried again, voice sharper. "Hotel Tango 47, Nelly's Tower, if you read, squawk ident." Nothing. Then, breaking through the white noise like a hand emerging from deep water, a voice. Female, calm, too calm. "Nelly's Tower, Hotel Tango 47. I read you broken and distorted. Declaring emergency. Crew unresponsive. Flying solo." Moss and Vaughn locked eyes. A C-130J Hercules carried a crew of 3 minimum, usually 5. Unresponsive meant incapacitated, poisoned, depressurized, dead. Flying solo meant one person at the controls of a 4-engine turboprop transport weighing 79,000 pounds, empty, designed for a flight crew, not a lone operator. "Hotel Tango, copy emergency. State your position and intentions." "Position 29er miles southeast your station, heading 270, altitude 7,200, descending. I have the field. Requesting priority landing, runway 21 left. I have wounded aboard, I need medical on the ramp." Wounded aboard, Moss felt her throat tight. "Roger, Hotel Tango, cleared direct, any runway emergency equipment rolling. Can you maintain control?" A pause. In that silence, Moss heard something she couldn't name. Not fear, something older. Affirm. "I can bring her in." The voice carried an accent, faint, Eastern European maybe, smoothed by years stateside. Moss nodded at Vaughn. "Get me the tail number details. I want to know who's flying that plane." Vaughn's fingers moved fast across the keyboard, pulling up the manifest. His face went pale. "Ma'am, according to Loadmaster records, the pilot in command is Major Irina Kovac, 16 years service, former Slovenian Air Force. She's listed as the co-pilot." Moss frowned. "Co-pilot? Then who's the pilot?" Vaughn swallowed. "Captain Anthony Del Vecchio, combat transport veteran, 300 hours in the Herc if the crew's unresponsive." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Moss grabbed the red phone that linked directly to base command. Within 90 seconds, the alert went base-wide. Emergency crews scrambled, fire trucks roared to life, ambulances converged on the designated runway. And in the sky above the Mojave, a gray whale of an aircraft dropped through thin clouds, wings level, engines humming a low dirge. Inside the cockpit, Irina Kovac sat alone. The pilot's seat beside her was empty, the harness unbuckled. Captain Del Vecchio slumped in the passenger cabin behind her with the rest of the crew, all of them breathing but unconscious, victims of a cabin pressure anomaly that had struck without warning at altitude. The oxygen masks had deployed too late for them. Irina had been in the cargo bay doing an equipment check when it happened. She'd sealed her section, grabbed a portable O2 bottle and climbed into the cockpit to find silence and slumped bodies. No time for panic. No time for anything but procedure. She'd taken the controls, stabilized the descent, declared the emergency. Now she flew alone, hands on the yoke, eyes scanning the instruments with the learned precision of someone who had flown through worse. She had flown through worse. Her call sign, the one whispered in certain circles but never used officially anymore, was Ghost. Not because she was invisible, but because she'd survived things that should have killed her. 3 ejections. 2 aircraft lost in training accidents that weren't her fault. 1 mission over the Balkans in her youth that nobody talked about. The Americans had taken her in, retrained her, trusted her with their machines, but never quite let her forget she was an outsider. She was the backup, the co-pilot, the one who handed checklists to men who flew, until now. The desert spread below her like crumpled canvas, ridges and valleys painted in ochre and shadow. The sun hadn't crested the mountains yet, and the world existed in that hushed blue hour where earth and sky blurred into one. Irina checked her airspeed, adjusted trim, felt the Hercules respond sluggishly. The aircraft was heavy, full fuel load and cargo, and it wanted to sink. She nudged the throttles forward, felt the turboprops growl. Nellie's tower came through again. Hotel Tango, you're 10 miles out. Winds 210 at 8 knots. Altimeter 3012. Cleared to land runway 21 left. Emergency equipment standing by. Irina clicked the mic twice in acknowledgement. She could see the base now, a sprawl of tarmac and hangars glowing faintly under sodium lights. She began her descent in earnest, lowering the landing gear manually since Del Vecchio would have handled that call. The gear locked with a reassuring thunk. Flaps next, incremental, feeling the aerodynamics shift. She remembered her instructor in Slovenia, a grizzled pilot named Marco who had flown MiGs before the dissolution. He told her once, "The plane will forgive you if you listen to her. She speaks in vibrations and sounds. Most pilots talk too much to hear." Irina listened now. She felt the Hercules settle into the glide slope, wings flexing slightly in the morning thermals. 3 miles. 2. The runway threshold lights blinked white against the dark asphalt. She crossed the numbers at 120 knots, flared gently, held the nose up as the main gear kissed concrete with a squeal of rubber. Nose gear down. Reverse thrust. The beast shuddered and slowed. Irina steered with her feet, toes dancing on the rudder pedals, keeping the center line. When the aircraft finally rolled to a stop halfway down the runway, she let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Emergency vehicles swarmed immediately, their red and white lights strobing across the fuselage. Paramedics boarded through the crew door. Irina stayed in her seat, hands still on the yoke, until a firefighter appeared beside her. "Ma'am, you okay?" She looked at him. Young face, concerned eyes, she nodded. "Check the crew first." He hesitated, then disappeared aft. Irina unstrapped, stood on shaking legs, and followed. The debrief room smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety. Irina sat across from Captain Moss, 2 safety officers, and a base flight surgeon who'd already cleared her physically but kept glancing at her like she might shatter. The crew was stable. The surgeon had reported earlier. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a malfunctioning environmental control system, a 1 in a million failure that had flooded the cabin with odorless death while Irina had been in the cargo bay with independent oxygen. They'd survive. Del Vecchio would fly again. But the question hanging in the sterile air was why Irina had been capable of what she'd done. Captain Moss spoke first, her voice even. "Major Kovac, walk us through your decision-making process once you discovered the crew incapacitated." Irina's accent thickened slightly when she was tired. "I assessed situation. 4 crew members unconscious, aircraft descending through 10,000 feet. I had no time to attempt revival. I sealed cargo section, secured portable oxygen, moved to cockpit. I took controls, stabilized aircraft, declared emergency. Standard procedure." One of the safety officers, a gray-haired lieutenant colonel named Barnes, leaned forward. "Major, with respect, there's nothing standard about a solo landing of a C-130 by a co-pilot. You're rated, yes, but piloting that aircraft alone under those conditions." He trailed off, shaking his head. Irina met his gaze. "I am rated. I have 2,000 hours in multi-engine turboprop. I flew Pilatus PC-9 in Slovenia, then transitioned to C-27 Spartan before emigrating. U.S. retrained me on C-130. I know the aircraft." Moss interjected. "Nobody's questioning your credentials, Major. We're trying to understand how you maintain composure. Most pilots, finding their entire crew down, would panic." Irina's jaw tightened. "Panic accomplishes nothing. Panic kills." The surgeon made a note. Barnes shifted in his seat. The room felt smaller. Finally, Moss spoke again, softer this time. "Your call sign, I saw it in your old file, Ghost. Why?" Irina's eyes flickered, something cold and distant moving behind them. "Because I have survived what should have killed me. 3 ejections, first at 24, engine failure over Adriatic. Second at 29, mid-air collision during NATO exercise. Third at 31, bird strike on takeoff. Each time I walked away. My instructor said I am ghost because death cannot catch me. Moss absorbed this. And you don't believe in luck. No, I believe in preparation. Outside the debriefing room, word spread fast. By noon, every pilot on Nelly's knew the story. Major Irina Kovac, the quiet co-pilot nobody paid much attention to, had landed a fully loaded Hercules solo after her entire crew went down. The details grew in the retelling, as details always do, but the core remained solid. She'd saved 5 lives, including her own, with nothing but skill and ice water in her veins. In the squadron-ready room, a group of F-22 Raptor pilots sat around a battered table, flight suits unzipped, helmets on the floor. Captain Jake Boxer Delacroix shuffled a deck of cards absently. "You hear about the Herc?" Lieutenant Mara Spike Ochoa nodded. "Whole base heard. Kovac, right, the Slovenian woman. Yeah, brought it in by herself. Crew was out cold." Another pilot, Major Seth Hammer Liu, looked up from his phone. "I flew with her once. Transport support for a red flag exercise 2 years ago. She didn't say 10 words the whole flight. Just did her job, landed us on a dirt strip in the middle of nowhere like it was nothing." Boxer dealt cards. "She's got a reputation. Old school, doesn't socialize much." Spike picked up her hand. "Maybe because people don't take her seriously. I've seen the look she gets. Eastern European accent, female, always the co-pilot. Half the base treats her like she's invisible." Hammer frowned. "That's gonna change now," Boxer grinned. "Yeah, Ghost just became a legend." They played cards in silence for a while, the conversation drifting to other topics, but the seed was planted. Respect in military aviation was earned in moments of crisis. Irina had earned it. Later that afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the spring mountains, Irina walked alone across the tarmac to the hangar where Hotel Tango 47 sat grounded, surrounded by maintenance crews dissecting the faulty environmental system. She stood in the shadow of the massive aircraft, looking up at the cockpit windows. Her reflection stared back, distorted in the glass. A crew chief approached, wiping grease from his hands. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Irina shook her head. "Just wanted to see her." The crew chief nodded, understanding something unspoken. "You brought her home. She'll fly again because of you." Irina didn't respond. She just stood there, one hand resting on the fuselage, feeling the cool metal beneath her palm until the sun touched the horizon and the sky turned the color of old bruises. The next morning, the base commander, Brigadier General Victor Harland, summoned Irina to his office. She arrived in dress blues, ribbons aligned, posture perfect. Harland was a fighter pilot by trade, a man who'd flown combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan, and he carried himself with the casual authority of someone who'd made life-or-death decisions at Mach 2. He gestured to a chair. "Sit, Major." Irina sat. Harland poured 2 cups of coffee from a carafe on his desk, slid one across. "You drink coffee?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because we need to talk and I need you alert." He settled into his own chair, regarding her with gray eyes that missed nothing. "Yesterday, you executed a textbook emergency landing under circumstances that would have broken most pilots. The crew's alive because of you. The aircraft's salvageable because of you. I've been flying for 30 years, and I can count on one hand the number of pilots I'd trust to do what you did." Irina sipped her coffee. "It was terrible," she didn't react. Harland continued. "But here's the problem. You're a major with 16 years of service and you're still flying co-pilot. Your performance reviews are exemplary. Your instructor ratings are off the charts, yet you've been passed over for aircraft commander twice." "Why?" Irina's face remained neutral. "I do not know, sir." "Bullshit. You know exactly why. I pulled your file this morning. I read every evaluation, every fitness report. And I talked to some people who have flown with you. You know what they told me?" Irina waited. "They said you're competent but hard to read, that you lack command presence, that you're technically proficient but not a natural leader. Do you know what all that means, Major? It means they do not trust me, sir." Harland slammed his palm on the desk, making the coffee cups jump. "It means they're idiots." You just flew a crippled aircraft solo and saved 5 lives without breaking a sweat, and they think you lack command presence. That's not a you problem, Major. That's a them problem. Irina blinked. It was the first time in 16 years an American officer had said that to her. Harlan leaned back, his voice calmer. I'm putting you in for a commendation medal and recommending you for upgrade to aircraft commander. Effective immediately, your lead pilot on any flight you're assigned. If anyone has a problem with that, they can come see me. Irina's throat tightened. Sir, thank you. Don't thank me, just keep doing what you do. And Major, yes, sir. Stop letting people underestimate you. You're a ghost. Start acting like one. The story reached beyond Nellie's within days. Military aviation is a small world, and news travels fast through the invisible network of pilots, crew chiefs, and air traffic controllers who speak their own language. By the end of the week, Irina's name appeared in a Pentagon briefing. By the end of the month, a journalist from Air Force Times requested an interview. Irina declined. She didn't fly for recognition, but recognition found her anyway. The F-22 squadron at Nellie's, the 433rd Weapons Squadron known as the Satans, began a tradition. Every morning at briefing, the duty officer would read the day's flight schedule, and when they reached the transport support missions, if Irina was flying, someone would mutter "ghost" on the ramp, and the others would tap their knuckles on the table twice. It was a small thing, a gesture, but in the rigid hierarchy of military respect, it meant everything. Irina heard about it from a young loadmaster who idolized her. She didn't acknowledge it. She just kept flying. 3 weeks after the incident, she was assigned to transport a team of PJs, pararescue jumpers, to a training exercise at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. The mission was routine, a 2-hour flight through clear skies, but as she ran through the pre-flight checklist in the cockpit, her new co-pilot, a fresh-faced first lieutenant named Eric Vasquez, watched her with barely concealed awe. Can I ask you something? Irina didn't look up from the checklist. Ask. When you were flying alone when the crew was down, did you think about ejecting, about saving yourself? Irina paused, her finger hovering over a switch. She turned to face him, and Vasquez saw something in her eyes he couldn't name. No, I had wounded aboard. You do not abandon wounded. But you were alone. You could have. I was not alone. I had the aircraft. I had my training. I had responsibility. That is enough. Vasquez nodded slowly, understanding blooming. This was what command presence looked like. Not volume or bravado, but certainty carved from experience. They flew to Mountain Home without incident. Irina landed smoothly, taxied to the ramp, and shut down the engines. As the PJs disembarked, their team leader, a master sergeant with 20 years and a chest full of ribbons, approached the cockpit. He looked up at Irina through the open window. Major Kovac. Yes, Sergeant. Heard what you did at Nellie's. Just wanted to say, if I'm ever in trouble, I hope you're the one flying. Irina's lips curved, a ghost of a smile. Let us hope you are never in trouble, Sergeant. He grinned and walked away. Vasquez watched the exchange, then said quietly, they respect you. Irina secured her harness. Respect is not given, it is demonstrated. But respect, Irina knew, was a currency that could turn worthless in an instant. The military was an institution built on tradition and hierarchy, and change came slowly, if at all. For every pilot who respected her now, there were still others who saw her success as an anomaly, a fluke, something to be explained away rather than celebrated. In the officers' club one evening, she overheard a conversation. 2 captains, both helicopter pilots, sitting in a corner booth with beers. I'm just saying, landing a Herc isn't that hard. It's a stable platform. She got lucky the engines didn't quit. Yeah, but she was solo, that's the point. So, autopilot does half the work. I've flown cargo birds, they practically land themselves. Irina stood at the bar, her back to them, nursing a glass of water. She didn't turn, didn't react. The bartender, an older enlisted airman named Ruiz who'd seen 30 years of officers come and go, leaned close. Want me to spill a drink on them, Major? Irina shook her head. No, they are entitled to their opinion. Even if it's stupid. Especially then. Stupid is louder than smart, always has been. Ruiz chuckled and moved away to serve another customer. Irina finished her water and left. Outside, the Nevada night was cold and clear, stars scattered like shattered glass across black velvet. She walked to the flight line, drawn by some unnamed need to be near the aircraft. The hangars loomed against the sky, dark shapes edged in security lighting. A C-130 sat on the ramp, chocks under the wheels, engine silent. She stood beside it, one hand on the landing gear strut, and thought about Slovenia. About the girl she'd been at 19, desperate to fly, joining an air force barely a decade old, proving herself in a world that didn't want her. About the ejections, the failures, the quiet humiliations of being good but never quite good enough. About emigrating to America with nothing but her logbook and a dream, starting over in a foreign language, relearning everything, swallowing pride, accepting being the co-pilot because it was the only door open. And about the moment in that cockpit alone, when she'd realized that all of it, every insult, every doubt, every closed door, had prepared her for that one flight. The universe, she thought, had a cruel sense of humor. The summons came in October. Irina was in the middle of a systems check when her phone buzzed. A text from the wing commander's office. Report to Building 201, 1400 hours. Dress blues. She glanced at the time. 2 hours. Vasquez, standing beside her with a clipboard, noticed her expression. Everything okay, ma'am? I do not know yet. At 1400 hours precisely, Irina stood outside Building 201, her ribbons gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway. She knocked twice. Enter. Inside, she found not just the wing commander, Colonel Diana Trent, but also Brigadier General Harland and 2 civilians she didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a tailored suit, and a younger man with a camera bag slung over his shoulder. Irina came to attention, saluted. Trent returned it. At ease, Major, have a seat. Irina sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Trent gestured to the civilians. Major Kovac, this is Dr. Alina Sokolov from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and Marcus Chen, a filmmaker under contract with the Air Force. They're here to discuss a project that involves you. Irina's expression didn't change, but her pulse quickened. Dr. Sokolov spoke, her accent faintly Russian. Major, we've been following your career with great interest, particularly the incident at Nellie's last month. Your ability to perform under extreme duress, combined with your unique background, makes you an ideal candidate for a study we're conducting on human performance in autonomous flight systems. Irina didn't understand half of that. I am sorry, Doctor, I do not follow. Chen, the filmmaker, leaned forward. What she means is they want to study how pilots like you make decisions when everything goes wrong, and they want me to film it. A documentary about resilience, leadership, and the future of military aviation. You'd be the centerpiece. Irina looked at Harland. He nodded. It's voluntary, Major, but I'll be honest. This could be good for the Air Force, good for recruiting, and good for you. Irina considered. She'd spent 16 years avoiding the spotlight. But something in Sokolov's eyes, a recognition of shared experience, made her pause. Finally, she spoke. If I agree, I have one condition. Trent raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. The focus must not be on me, it must be on crew, on the team. I did not land that aircraft because I am special. I landed it because I was trained, because others trained me. That is the story, Sokolov smiled. That, Major, is exactly the story we want to tell. The filming began in November. Chen and his crew followed Irina through her daily routine, pre-flight checks, mission briefs, simulator sessions. She was stiff at first, hyper-aware of the camera, but Chen had a gift for fading into the background, and eventually she forgot he was there. The interviews were harder. Chen asked questions that peeled back layers she'd spent years building. Why did you emigrate to the United States? They were sitting in an empty briefing room, the camera focused on her face. Irina chose her words carefully. Slovenia is small country, beautiful but small. After independence, our Air Force had limited resources, limited aircraft. I wanted to fly more, learn more. America offered that. Was it hard starting over? Yes, very hard. My English was poor. My credentials were questioned. I was older than most new pilots and I was woman. There were many doors closed. But you kept going. Irina's eyes hardened. What else is there to do? You go forward or you stop. Stopping is not option. Chen let the silence stretch, then asked the question she'd been dreading. Tell me about the ejections. 3 times, that's extraordinary. Irina looked away toward the window where the tarmac shimmered in the heat. First ejection, I was 24. Engine failure over Adriatic Sea. I was flying training mission in MiG-21. Engine seized, no warning. I ejected at 300 meters. Parachute opened, I landed in water, was rescued by helicopter. Aircraft crashed into sea. Were you scared? Terrified, but I was also angry. I had not made mistake, but I lost aircraft. In military aviation, that follows you. The second ejection, mid-air collision during NATO exercise. I was flying Pilatus PC-9 formation flight with 4 aircraft. Another pilot misjudged spacing, clipped my wing. Both aircraft went down. I ejected, he ejected. We both survived. Investigators cleared me, but damage was done. I was unlucky pilot. Chen nodded. And the third, Irina's jaw tightened. Third ejection was in United States during transition training at Pensacola. Bird strike on takeoff, T-6 Texan. Canopy shattered, engine ingested debris, fire warning. I ejected at 200 feet. Seat worked perfectly. I walked away with bruises, but 3 ejections. In aviation, that is a curse. People whisper. They say you are jinxed. Do you believe that? Irina looked directly at the camera. No, I believe in probability. I believe in training. I believe that sometimes the universe tests you. I have been tested. I am still here. The documentary footage was interspersed with interviews from other pilots. Chen tracked down some of Irina's former instructors, colleagues, even the PJ Master Sergeant from Mountain Home. The picture that emerged was complex. Some praised her skill, her composure, her dedication. Others admitted they'd underestimated her, dismissed her, overlooked her. One retired colonel, who'd been her squadron commander in her early years stateside, was brutally honest. I didn't think she had what it took. She was quiet, didn't drink with the boys, didn't play the game. I wrote in her evaluation that she was technically proficient but lacking leadership qualities. I was wrong, dead wrong, and I've regretted it ever since. Chen asked, why were you wrong? Because I confused leadership with personality. I wanted pilots who were loud, confident, charismatic. Irina was none of those things, but she was competent, reliable, and unflappable. Turns out, those are the qualities that matter when everything goes to hell. That clip would become one of the most shared moments of the documentary. But the heart of the film, the sequence that would define it, was the recreation. Dr. Sokolov's study required Irina to fly a simulator replicating the Nelly's incident, this time with Chen's cameras recording every moment. The simulator was a full-motion cockpit, perfect in its details, and the scenario was programmed to match that morning precisely. Irina strapped in, adjusted her seat, ran through the checklist. The lights dimmed. The scenario began. Chen watched from the control room as Irina's hands moved across the instruments with practiced fluidity. The simulator injected the emergency, crew unresponsive, systems degrading, alarms blaring. On the monitors, her heart rate spiked, but her face remained calm. She isolated the problem, stabilized the aircraft, declared the emergency, and flew the approach. When she landed, the simulator went still. Irina sat in the darkened cockpit, hands on the yoke, breathing steadily. Chen's voice came through the intercom. How do you feel? Irina's response was quiet. Like I am back there. Is that hard? Yes, but necessary. If I forget how it felt, I forget why it mattered. Chen ended the recording. Later, reviewing the footage, he realized he'd captured something rare, a moment of absolute vulnerability from someone who never allowed herself that luxury. He made a note. This would be the closing shot. The documentary premiered at the Pentagon in March. Irina was required to attend, standing beside Chen and Dr. Sokolov as military brass and defense officials filled the auditorium. She wore her dress blues, her expression carefully neutral as the lights dimmed and the film began. 52 minutes long, it was titled Ghost Protocol, and it opened with cockpit audio from the Nelly's incident, her voice, calm and steady, declaring the emergency. The camera pulled back to reveal the radar screen, the flashing altitude readings, the chaos in the tower. Then it cut to Irina's face in interview, and she began to tell her story. Chen had edited it masterfully. The film wove together her history, the ejections, the emigration, the struggle for acceptance, with the Nelly's incident as the narrative spine. It featured the other pilots' testimonials, the simulator recreation, and a haunting score that underscored the emotional weight without overwhelming it. The final sequence was Irina in the simulator, her hands steady on the yoke, intercut with footage of the actual Hercules landing, emergency vehicles swarming, paramedics rushing aboard. Over it, her voice. People ask if I was afraid. Of course I was afraid. Fear is human, but fear does not fly the aircraft. Training flies the aircraft. Discipline flies the aircraft. And the knowledge that people depend on you, that flies the aircraft most of all. The screen faded to black. Silence. Then applause, starting slow and building until the entire auditorium was on its feet. Irina stood stiffly, uncomfortable with the attention, until Brigadier General Harland leaned over and whispered, "Let them honor you. You earned it." After the screening, a reception. Officers she'd never spoken to approached to shake her hand. A two-star general told her she was an inspiration. A young female cadet, no older than 20, asked for her autograph with tears in her eyes. Irina signed, feeling like a fraud, but Chen pulled her aside. "You okay? I do not like this, the attention." "I know, but look around, see those young pilots, those women, you just showed them what's possible, that matters." Irina looked. She saw faces, young and old, watching her with something that looked like hope. Maybe Chen was right, maybe it did matter. Later, alone in her hotel room, she received a text from an unknown number. "Saw the film, proud to have served with you. Del Vecchio." Captain Anthony Del Vecchio, the pilot who'd been unconscious in the cabin. She stared at the message for a long time, then typed a single word. "Likewise." Spring turned to summer. The documentary was released to the public, streaming on a military-focused platform, and within weeks it went viral. Excerpts appeared on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Irina's face, stern and composed, became a meme. She landed the plane alone, overlaid on images of competence and quiet strength. Aviation forums dissected every decision she'd made. Flight schools used the Nellies incident as a case study. And slowly, imperceptibly, something shifted. The 433rd Weapons Squadron, the Satans, invited her to their annual dining-out event. It was a formal affair, dress blues and protocol, and Irina almost declined. But Boxer, the F-22 pilot who dealt cards in the ready room months ago, called her personally. "Ghost, you need to be there, trust me." She went. The evening was a blur of toasts and speeches, but near the end, the squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Yoon, stood and called for silence. "We have a tradition in the Satans. Every year we recognize one aviator who embodies the spirit of this squadron: skill, courage, and humility. This year the choice was unanimous." Yoon looked directly at Irina. "Major Irina Kovach, call sign Ghost, please stand." Irina stood, her heart pounding. Yoon continued. "On behalf of the 433rd Weapons Squadron, we're awarding you honorary membership. You're one of us now, and we're damn proud of it." The room erupted in applause. Spike, the female F-22 pilot, brought forward a plaque, a mounted piece of metal engraved with the squadron insignia and Irina's call sign. Irina took it, her hands trembling slightly, and managed two words: "Thank you." Later at the bar, Boxer approached with a beer. "You know what the best part is?" Irina shook her head. "You didn't ask for any of this. You just did your job. That's what makes you legit." Irina considered this, then clinked her glass against his. "To doing the job. To doing the job." Around them, the squadron celebrated, and for the first time in 16 years, Irina felt like she belonged. Not because she'd proven herself, she'd been doing that all along, but because they'd finally chosen to see her. That night, walking back to her quarters under a sky crowded with stars, she thought about the girl she'd been in Slovenia, the one who dreamed of flying faster and farther than anyone thought possible. That girl would be proud. Irina smiled, a real smile, and kept walking. Autumn arrived, painting the desert in shades of gold and rust. Irina was promoted to lieutenant colonel in a small ceremony attended by her squadron, General Harland, and a few others. The rank came with new responsibilities: flight lead, training officer, and inevitably more visibility. She accepted it with the same stoic grace she brought to everything, but inside she felt the weight. Leadership wasn't just flying anymore. It was mentorship, politics, paperwork. The further you climbed, the less you flew. One afternoon, she was summoned to the simulator building. Inside, she found a young captain she didn't recognize standing beside Dr. Sokolov. The captain looked nervous. Sokolov smiled. Colonel Kovac, meet Captain Amara Thompson. She's a new pilot, fresh from training, and she requested you specifically as her instructor pilot. Irina studied Thompson. Mid-twenties, dark skin, sharp eyes. She held herself with a tension Irina recognized, the need to prove, to overcome. "Why me?" Irina asked. Thompson swallowed. "Because I watched your documentary, ma'am. I saw what you did, and I've been told I don't have command presence either, that I'm too quiet. I thought maybe you could teach me how to." She trailed off, struggling for words. Irina understood. She gestured toward the simulator. "Come, we fly." Over the next 3 months, Irina trained Thompson personally. She was a good pilot, instinctive and quick, but plagued by self-doubt. Irina recognized the pattern, always second-guessing, always deferring, always waiting for permission to be excellent. One day, after a particularly frustrating sim session where Thompson had hesitated on a critical decision, Irina stopped the scenario. "Why did you wait?" Thompson's voice was small. "I wasn't sure it was the right call. And if you were alone, if no one else could decide?" I don't know, ma'am." Irina leaned back in her seat. "Let me tell you something. When I was alone in that cockpit, I did not have luxury of doubt. I had responsibility. Crew, aircraft mission. I made decision because decision had to be made. Was it right decision? I do not know, but it was a decision and I owned it. That is what leadership is. Not being right every time, but being willing to decide and live with consequence." Thompson absorbed this. "What if I make the wrong call?" "Then you learn. Then you do better next time, but you must make the call. Silence kills." Something clicked in Thompson's eyes. From that moment her flying changed. She became decisive, confident, still quiet but no longer hesitant. By December she was cleared for solo missions. Irina watched her taxi out for her first flight as pilot in command and felt something unfamiliar: pride. Not in herself, but in someone she'd helped shape. Winter brought snow to the mountains, ringing Nellies, a rare sight that transformed the desert into something otherworldly. Irina stood on the flight line one evening, watching flakes drift down through the orange glow of the ramp lights. Her phone rang. A number with a Slovenian country code. She answered. "Irina Kovac." "Irina, it is Marco," her old instructor. She hadn't heard his voice in a decade. "Marco, how are you?" "Old, retired, but I hear things. I hear you are famous now." Ina laughed, a sound that surprised her. "Not famous, just visible." "I watched your film, the documentary. I am proud of you." Irina's throat tightened. Marco had been hard on her, demanding, never satisfied. Hearing those words from him was worth more than any medal. "Thank you, you taught me well. I taught you to listen to the aircraft. You taught yourself the rest." "Irina, do you remember what I told you before you left Slovenia?" She remembered. "You said the sky does not care where you are from. Only if you respect it." "Yes, and you have respected it. Now the sky respects you back. That is rare." They talked for an hour about flying, about the old days, about the strange paths life takes. When they finally hung up, Irina stood in the snow, tears freezing on her cheeks, and felt something she'd never allowed herself before: contentment. The next morning she received orders. A new assignment, effective in 6 months. She was being transferred to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs as an instructor and deputy commandant of cadets. It was a desk job mostly, but with opportunities to fly and to shape the next generation. General Harlan called her to his office to discuss it. "What do you think, Colonel?" Irina looked at the orders. "It is good opportunity, but I will miss operational flying." "You'll still fly, just less often." "But Irina, listen, you've proven yourself in the cockpit. Now you need to prove yourself in a different way. Those cadets need someone like you, someone who knows what it's like to fight for every inch." Irina nodded slowly. "I will accept." Harlan smiled. "Good, and Colonel, one more thing. The Air Force is putting you in for the Distinguished Flying Cross for the Nellies incident. It's been approved. Ceremony in May." Irina blinked. The DFC was a combat decoration, rarely awarded outside of wartime. "Sir, I do not deserve." "Shut up and take the damn medal, Irina. You saved lives. You did something extraordinary. Stop downplaying it." She left his office in a daze. A medal, an instructor position, recognition. It all felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life, but it was hers. She'd earned it, one flight at a time. The ceremony in May was held at Nellies, outdoors on the parade ground under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Rows of airmen stood at attention, dress uniforms crisp in the morning sun. Irina stood on the platform beside General Harland, feeling exposed and small despite the ribbons on her chest. Harland read the citation, his voice carrying across the field. For extraordinary achievement in aerial flight as pilot in command of a C-130J aircraft under emergency conditions. Lieutenant Colonel Irina Kovac demonstrated exceptional airmanship, sound judgment, and unwavering commitment to the safety of her crew and aircraft. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself and the United States Air Force. He pinned the medal to her uniform, a bronze cross suspended from a ribbon striped red, white, and blue. Irina saluted. He returned it, then leaned close and whispered, "You've come a long way, Ghost." She whispered back, "We both have, sir." The crowd applauded. Irina scanned the faces and saw her squadron, Thompson standing with tears on her face, Del Vecchio and the rest of the crew she'd saved, now fully recovered. She saw Chen, the filmmaker, camera in hand, capturing the moment. And in the back, almost hidden, she saw Spike and Boxer and Hammer, the F-22 pilots who'd started calling her Ghost with respect instead of mockery. They nodded. She nodded back. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Irina endured handshakes and congratulations, feeling awkward and grateful in equal measure. But the moment that mattered came later when she was alone in the hangar, standing beside a C-130 identical to the one she'd landed. Thompson found her there. "Ma'am, you okay?" Irina turned. "Yes, just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange it is. I have flown for 25 years, thousands of hours, dozens of aircraft, and I will be remembered for one flight, one moment." Thompson stepped closer. "Maybe, but it was the right moment and you were the right person." Irina considered this. "Perhaps, or perhaps I was just the person who was there." "Isn't that what heroism is, ma'am? Being there when it matters and doing what needs to be done?" Irina smiled. "You sound like instructor now." Thompson grinned. "I learned from the best." They stood together in the hangar's shadow, two pilots separated by age and experience but united by something deeper. The understanding that flying was more than mechanics and procedures. It was trust. In the aircraft, in yourself, in the people who depended on you. And sometimes, if you were lucky, that trust became something larger, legacy. Irina looked up at the C-130's cockpit, remembering the weight of the yoke in her hands, the silence of the radio, the moment when she'd been utterly alone and utterly certain. She would carry that moment forever, not as a burden but as proof. Proof that she was enough. That she had always been enough.